Good evening, everyone. We're truly glad to have you back with us tonight. In this episode, we're diving into the lives of people who are often invisible to the world, trash collectors. But what happens when they're quiet? Nightly routines lead them straight into the arms of something horrifying. Before we begin, if you enjoy dark tales like these and want more real horror stories every day, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and keeps the stories coming. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights, and listen closely. You're watching Sleep Horror Stories. A terrifying experience showed my brother and me that evil can hide in the smallest, most tempting things, so subtle, you don't even realize you've invited it in. That's exactly what happened to us. We were innocent, unaware of what our actions could unleash, and because of that, we lived through the most horrifying moment of our lives, one that's been nearly impossible to overcome. I'm sharing this story in hopes that it might stop someone else from making the same mistake. My brother and I have always lived near Clearwater Beach, Florida. Our uncle manages one of the beach access areas. He oversees the maintenance, the vendors, everything. We were in charge of collecting trash. Sometimes we'd go out in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon or at night. There was no strict schedule, just the job of keeping the place clean for the tourists. The pay wasn't great, but we got by. The vendors often shared their leftovers with us, and we all helped each other out. Our uncle, aside from his job, also went fishing. He'd give us part of his catch to cook for dinner. Our parents weren't around anymore. They both drowned in a boating accident when we were just 8 and 5. Since then, we've lived alone in the small house they left us. We survived day by day, but by the grace of God, we've never gone to sleep with empty stomachs. Nighttime was our favorite time to work. The beach would be quiet, just the wind and the sound of the waves crashing gently on the shore. It was peaceful. That's when it happened. We saw something glowing far off in the distance, a strange shimmer between the rocks. We looked at each other and headed straight toward it. The object was wedged between some rocks like someone had placed it there on purpose, just high enough so the tide wouldn't wash it away. It took effort, but we managed to pull it out. It was gold. Real gold. I can't say exactly what it was, maybe a piece of jewelry or a broken artifact, but it looked expensive. It even had what looked like diamonds embedded along the top. We were stunned. Our first instinct was to sell it. Maybe this was our chance. My brother slipped it into his pocket, and we kept working for a bit before heading home. That night, we grilled some fish over a fire in the backyard and just sat there, staring at each other, both silently thinking the same thing. This could change everything. We hadn't felt that kind of hope in a long time. We placed the object next to an old photo of our parents, almost like we believed they had sent us that blessing. Lying in bed, we dreamed out loud. My brother talked about leaving the country, starting a new life. If the object was worth enough, he'd finally go. I didn't like the thought of being separated from him. I told him that wherever he went, I'd find a way to follow. We hugged, said a few more words, and drifted off to sleep, planning to find out what the gold was worth in the morning. But we didn't sleep long. It must have been midnight when we were jolted awake by a loud knock on the front door. Someone was banging on it repeatedly. No one ever came by that late. My first thought was maybe our uncle, but my brother came with me to check just in case. We were only a couple steps away from the door when the knocking came again, faster, louder. He opened the door. No one was there. We stepped outside, looked around. Empty, not a soul. Whoever knocked had vanished into thin air, and we hadn't heard a single footstep. We locked the door and started walking back inside, and that's when we saw her. A woman was standing in our living room. She was tall, soaking wet, but not like water. Her hair was oily, slick, heavy, and dripping onto the floor. Her skin looked like it was melting, wrinkled, blistered. She had no eyebrows. She was completely naked, and she was destroying everything. Throwing chairs, knocking over shelves, screaming mine, mine, over and over like a broken record. My brother approached her cautiously, asked who she was, why she'd broken in. She didn't answer. She just kept yelling, ransacking the place, flipping everything over. That's when he grabbed her arm, and she screamed. But it wasn't human. It was like nails on glass, like radio, static, a shriek that made every nerve in my body twist. I dropped to my knees. She slapped my brother so hard he collapsed. He didn't move. I panicked. She turned toward me, grabbed my throat with one freezing hand, and snarled, "Where is it?" She was talking about the gold. My brother, groggy and injured, crawled toward the picture of our parents, reached up, and stuffed the object into his pocket while she had her back turned. Then, with all the strength he had left, he ran at her and shoved her hard. She fell. But she stood up immediately, as if nothing happened. Then her pupils disappeared. Her eyes turned solid white. She began to growl, deep, primal sounds like something not human. My mind froze. I couldn't move. My brother grabbed my arm and screamed at me to run. We bolted out of the house, sprinting into the dark. But when we looked back, we saw her. She burst through the door and began sprinting toward us. That image is burned into my brain. That face, that thing running straight at us. I couldn't take it. In a moment of desperation, I ripped the object from my brother's pocket and threw it as hard as I could, straight at her. The gold piece landed right at her feet. She stopped, picked it up, and glared at us with pure hatred. Then, without saying a word, she turned and ran toward the ocean. She waded into the water, deeper and deeper, until she was gone, swallowed by the waves. The moment she vanished, my brother collapsed. Some neighbors heard my screams and called for help. He survived, but it took months for him to recover. To this day, he's not the same. He still asks me where she is, where the woman who visited us went. He never got his old self back, and that's what hurts the most, because now I'm all he has. After that night, we never touched another treasure on that beach, ever again. No matter how shiny, no matter how tempting. We learned the hard way that some things should never be picked up. My name is Carlos, and back then, I was working as a garbage collector for the city of El Paso. I was going through one of the darkest moments of my life. My wife had cancer, and the treatments were brutally expensive. I had already taken out loans from every possible place just to afford them. But my salary wasn't even close to being enough. When the borrowed money dried up, I was drowning in debt. Problems piled up, and every solution fell out of reach. Late at night, while my wife slept, I'd just stare at her, thinking I would do anything to save her. But I was just a garbage man. I didn't make much. And she had to quit her job because of the illness. She was no longer strong enough to work. Every single night, I dropped to my knees and begged God. I begged for a miracle, for strength, for a chance. I held on to my faith with everything I had. From the moment I woke up until I went to sleep, I never stopped praying. I couldn't bear the thought of losing her. I cried almost daily, just imagining what life would be without her. I looked for better paying jobs, but I got rejection after rejection. Some companies didn't even bother to call back. That was the worst part, feeling invisible, hopeless. Then one day at work, they told me I'd be assigned to a new collection zone. They'd hired new guys and were reorganizing the routes. I didn't care, it was actually closer to home. Days went by like normal. Then one afternoon, while lifting some garbage bags into the truck, a flyer slipped out and landed at my feet. It was for a loan company, one that claimed they gave out money to anyone, regardless of debt, credit, or situation. That flyer felt like a sign. I couldn't stop thinking about it. By midday, I couldn't take it anymore. I asked my coworker to cover for me, jumped off the truck, went home to change, and headed straight for the address on the flyer. It was in a shady alley on the east side of town. The building was at the far end, half hidden, with a sign above a dark door. I hesitated. thought about turning around. But my wife's face came into my mind, and I kept walking. I knocked on the door. It opened by itself. Inside, it was pitch black. I couldn't see a thing. But I walked in anyway. Seconds later, the door slammed shut behind me. Dim lights flickered on, just enough for me to make out about 10 people standing in a circle. They were all wearing masks. I froze. I didn't know who they were, but my gut told me I was in danger. My desperation clouded every warning sign. Or maybe I did see them. I just chose to ignore them. I tried to open the door. It was locked. They all stared at me in silence. I stood there, paralyzed, until one of them, a woman, removed her mask. She looked at me and calmly said, "Come closer. The door won't open until we say it does." I obeyed. She then began to describe my life. My wife's illness, my debt, my sleepless nights, like she'd been watching me for years. She said they could solve all of it. Every problem, every bill, every obstacle. But there was a price. Break time equals 0. 5S/. I told her I didn't have money or anything of value. She leaned in and whispered, "Then sell us your soul. Not now, but when you die." In return, they'd give me a good life, a dignified life. I refused. I told her I believed in God, that I could never offer up my soul. But then someone pulled out a knife. The woman said calmly, "You're not leaving here until your soul is promised. And if you won't offer it, we'll take it." They started yelling at me, pressuring me to decide. It wasn't a game. They were serious. Under the weight of fear and desperation, I said yes. They began a ritual, chanting in a language I'd never heard. It sounded like monks chanting prayers. They took some of my blood, mixed it with other strange substances, and poured it into a fire in the center of the room. I won't describe the rest. It was horrifying. After about 10 minutes, they let me go. They said my problems would be gone until the day I died. But my soul belonged to their master. I ran home, still shaking. I kept telling myself it was fake, that it was just a group of religious fanatics. But the next day, everything changed. A company that had ignored my application called and offered me a job with great pay. I was approved for a private loan, even with my debt. I paid for my wife's treatments. My income doubled, then tripled. Opportunities were everywhere. I felt happy again, hopeful. But the feeling didn't last. A few months later, the joy was gone. I couldn't enjoy anything. At night, I started seeing shadows in the corners of rooms, disappearing whenever I tried to focus on them. No matter what room I was in, I felt someone watching me. Always. And then came the voices. Whispers telling me to hurt myself, saying vile, terrifying things. Things no human being should ever hear. It wasn't just in my head. I know it wasn't. They wanted me to end my life, so they could claim what I promised. Ever since that deal, I've never known peace. I cry every night. I know God hasn't forgiven me. I should have died that night, but instead, I sold my soul. And now I have to live with that until my last breath. And when that day comes, I'll have to face whatever's waiting.